after beauty in my work. I'm after power, life, vitality. Beauty seems to appeal more to the senses, whereas if you get into the power of expression, then you're getting at the very roots of life. As I walk around the grounds where I live, I find myself looking at tree limbs and tree growth. A tree seems rather like a river, especially at night. But it's also a torrent that's flowing from the top of the tree, rushing down the trunk into the ground. I get that feeling of tremendous black forest rushing down. When I run my hand over the tree bark, the fingers sort of memorize the feel of the ridges and the hollows. Then, when I'm working on something like the prophet, the hands seem to remember the texture of the bark and push the soft clay into similar rhythmic patterns. Because I'm surrounded by trees and looking at them every day on my way to the studio, I've noticed that a great many of them seem to be grouped in threes. It may be one tree, but it branches into three main branches, and the way these branches grow from each other suggests to me human forms. In a piece called Girl Arranging Hair, the two arms are the two branches of the tree. Her elongated neck is the third branch. At the top of this neck, of course, is the head. The back of the neck is also the hair flowing down, yet there's definitely a tree feeling about the whole thing. I like to come here in the morning. It's so peaceful. This is a great place where man and nature have tossed their discards together in a marvelous jumble of shapes and forms. And those bluffs, eroded into fantastic architectural forms. I play a game of reshaping them. I can see where I'd cut a slice off here and add it on there to increase a projection, make more dramatic the shadow in that cleft. The result of this game of recarving the cliff gives me strong mental images that crop up later in my work, where they're modified to make other images. When I get into clay, there's no conscious concept. That is, there's no visual conscious concept. There might be a feeling, an emotion, something within. But I keep loose. I adopt what I call a let-go attitude. You know, let go and see what happens. Mind you, I'm watching the clay while I'm doing this, so that there's a balance, a rhythm, a harmony. But what it's going to be, what the whole thing will be, I don't know until I'm finished. Touching, the tactile sense, is basic to every human being. We experience it even before we are born. A baby in the womb is aware of the warm, protective fluid that surrounds him, and after birth, the sense of touch is still predominant. And of course, in adult life, it comes out very strongly in lovemaking. I'm almost like a midwife. I'm so involved in the mechanics and techniques that I don't know what it is until after the baby is born. When I'm working on a sculpture, I'm involved in the technique, in getting the balance and harmony, in getting strength, in making things become more and more vital, in releasing an energy which I believe is in the clay and in the forms coming out. Shape is a language, and there are certain shapes that have at all times moved people, simply because they're so powerful in themselves. These are universal, and they've always existed. One of them, of course, is the cross, which, because of the strong upright and horizontal crossing, is a very powerful shape, apart from its religious significance. There really should be a surprise element in sculpture. There should be some obscurity, some puzzlement. If it just has a front view and the back is just as you'd expect, in my opinion, you'd better draw it on paper. As you walk around a sculpture, you should not be able to guess what's on the other side. There should be surprises all the way around, different shapes that you can't imagine. This disciplined face turned out to be a Japanese warrior. If you walk around on the other side, a surprise comes because there is a spirit. It's the top knot on the head of the warrior that turns into a spirit floating out through space. It's a separate thing. It's a being on its own. I like the way a 3-year-old looks at sculpture, you know, freshly. Some of the trouble is that we have a preconceived idea of what a sculpture should be, which sets up a mental barrier so that We can't see the pieces in front of us as a child would. This looks like an old river boulder that the water has worn down. But it's actually the very calm face of a young woman asleep. If you pick her up, the heft, the feel, the weight is delightful. Part of its charm is the actual weight, as if it is stone. It's actually concrete. And indeed, concrete is stone. It's reconstituted. It's most peaceful, and to me, immensely satisfying. I've always had a feeling for stone. There's a communication between the stone and myself. Something does flow between the two of us. When I'm left alone with a particular stone, something happens. It's hard to put into words. There's a flowing, a vibration or something that is going back and forth. When I found this granite rock that I call Moon God, I was digging in the garden and dug him up. I felt him, felt the heft of him, looked at him. I say him because I already felt that he was a something, a presence, that there was some form of vitality, energy, perhaps you would call it life in there. I took a carborundum block and gently rubbed it. I didn't want to force my own will on it and bring out some shape that I had conceived. And it wasn't until it was finished that I saw this face had emerged. So it was really the rock itself that took shape, not my conception of it. This piece is one of the oldest stones in the world. It's Precambrian. It's lava. Very dense, very beautiful. To me, it has the feeling of eternity. It's the earth pared down to the very essential. When I found the rock, I waited, looked at it, and waited, almost as if waiting for permission before carving. What emerged was a very strange, strong, brooding face. The forehead's massive and intellectual looking. I left some of the original texture on it. It almost has a global look to it. As it turns around, it becomes smoothly abstract. It's an entirely mysterious but satisfactory thing. The point is that it's a boulder. There's no other way of saying it. You can't say, this is a face. It's a boulder. It's a stone. Life is energy, force. Life is giving. It's a constant flowing out. And what flows out eventually flows back, perhaps in another form. Whatever seems to be good, whatever seems to be positive, has a force that carries it on. It has a momentum, and as it rolls on, it becomes more and more powerful. I'm trying to latch onto this thing, to keep the force of good, and all the creative things that can come through this goodness, keep them flowing. is a cosmic life force, a consciousness, that does bond both what we call inanimate and animate beings. An energy that exists in all things so that we are interrelated. And if we're sensitive to it, we can push back our own horizons, and we can go both backward and forward in time.